Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that can cause headaches for pretty much everyone in medical coding, CPT surgical guidelines. You know, these rules are the absolute foundation of accurate billing, but wow, can they get complex?
A lot of the time, it just boils down to misunderstanding the core rules, what's included, what's not, and how to report the whole thing correctly. If you've ever just sat there staring at a surgical claim, second-guessing yourself, you are definitely in the right place. Okay, let's dive in.
So we're going to think of this as opening up a toolkit, right? Each guideline is a specific tool, and each one is designed to help you build a clean, accurate claim right from the start. By the time we're done, you'll have these tools ready to go for any situation. First up, we've got the biggest, most important tool in our kit, understanding the CPT surgical package. This concept, it's central to literally everything else we're going to talk about because it defines what's actually included in the price of a surgery. Think of it like booking an all-inclusive vacation. When you book it, the flights, the hotel, the meals, it's all bundled into one price. Well, CPT does the exact same thing. It bundles a whole bunch of related services into one single surgical code. And this is what's so crucial to get. Just look at the scope of this package. It is not just the operation itself. It includes that pre-op evaluation on the day of the procedure, writing orders, and even the normal follow-up care, like taking out stitches later. This is probably one of the most common reasons claims get denied. People try to bill for these included services separately.
I love this quote. It is such a great way to remember it. The package covers all the standard, expected work that goes on around the main event. It's all designed to make billing simpler for the typical course of a procedure, from beginning to end.
Okay, so this right here, this is the critical dividing line. Routine follow-up is part of the deal, absolutely. But a major complication that forces a patient to go back to the operating room, that is not included. That new procedure is a totally separate billable event. Knowing that difference is key.
All right, let's grab our next tool. So we know which services are bundled, but what about the physical stuff? The materials used during and after a procedure. Are those included too?
This chart lays it out pretty clearly. The way to think about it is this. Routine supplies, stuff like gauze and basic dressings, that's just considered overhead. It's part of the package. But specific, more substantial items like a cast, a splint, or a special brace, those are considered separate, and you'd report those using HCPCS Level 2 codes.
Okay, now we're getting into an area that can get really tricky for a lot of coders. But don't worry, our toolkit has exactly the right tools for handling what to do when more than one procedure is performed in the same session.
So there's a really clear hierarchy you have to follow. You always lead with the most complex or major procedure. That one gets listed first, at its full value. Then, any other lesser procedures done at the same time are listed after that with modifier 51, which is basically a signal to the payer that, hey, multiple procedures happened here.
Now for another really key concept, this separate procedure designation. You'll see this little note next to some CPT codes. The best way to think of it is as a procedure that can stand on its own, but a lot of the time it's just one step in a much bigger operation.
So, how do you know when you can actually bill for it? Well, it's all about context. For instance, if a surgeon removes a little skin lesion from a patient's back while they're in there for a major abdominal surgery, that's totally unrelated. You can report that separately. But if a procedure is just a necessary step to get the main surgery done, like using a diagnostic scope to see where you're going, then it's considered an integral part of the main show and it gets bundled.
So, what happens when you run into a brand new technique or a procedure that's so rare there's just no CPT code for it? Does that mean you can't bill for it? Are you just out of luck? Not at all. Our final tool covers this exact scenario.
This is your essential fallback, your safety net. The unlisted codes exist for exactly these kinds of situations. But, and this is a big but, using one isn't as simple as just popping a number on a claim form. It means you have to provide some extra info to justify the service. Yeah, you can't just submit the code. You have to submit the story. You need to send in a report that clearly explains what was done, why it was medically necessary, and how it stacks up against an existing procedure in terms of effort, time, and complexity. That documentation is what gives the payer the information they need to figure out a fair reimbursement.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap of our toolkit. First, always remember that all-inclusive surgical package. Next, know when you can bill separately for those special supplies or that unexpected trip back to the OR. Then, make sure you sequence multiple procedures correctly using modifier 51. Understand the separate procedure rule. When is it truly separate? And finally, if you use an unlisted code, back it up with a detailed story. These are your blueprints for building really strong, defensible surgical claims.
And that pretty much wraps up this explainer. We have equipped your toolkit with the core CPT surgical guidelines. You know, as technology like robotics and AI keeps changing the face of surgery, it's really interesting to think about how these foundational rules are going to have to adapt. Hopefully, you now have a much more confident framework for navigating whatever comes next. Thanks for watching.